They told you history began somewhere else. They told you power came from the north. They told you civilization moved into Africa, not out of it. But what if the very map of the world was drawn after the truth was buried? What if entire empires were removed, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too early? Tonight, you are not watching a history lesson. You are witnessing a return. Because when forgotten, history comes back. Power shifts. Before Rome carved its first stone, before Greece named philosophy, before Europe learned to write its own name, Africa was already old. Older than memory. Older than myth. Older than the lies that replaced it. And that is where our story begins. Long before borders, before nations, before flags, there was land that taught humanity how to live. Africa was not isolated. It was central. Rivers were roads. Deserts were libraries. Mountains were temples. The Nile did not just feed Egypt. It fed an entire civilizational network stretching deep into Nubia. Kush, Punt, and beyond. People traded gold, cattle, salt, iron, stories, and stars. This was not a primitive world. It was an organized system. Cities had laws. Kings ruled with councils. Queens commanded armies. Priests studied astronomy with naked eyes and shocking accuracy. And while later civilizations fought for survival, Africa was already asking bigger questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? How do we rule without destroying ourselves? South of Egypt, beyond the cataracts of the Nile, rose a power older than the pyramids, you know. Nubia, later called Kush. Not coins. This land controlled gold, the currency of the ancient world. Power. Egypt did not conquer Nubia first. Egypt depended on it. Nubian kings ruled through wealth, faith, and discipline. Their cities, Kerma, Napata, were monumental long before conquest. And here's what textbooks rush past. Kush did not copy Egypt. Egypt copied Kush. The crowns, the gods, the sacred mountain Jebel Barkal believed to be the throne of Amun himself. When Egypt collapsed under invasion and corruption, it was Kush that restored order. Black pharaohs marched north, not south. They did not loot Egypt. They revived it. This was the 25th dynasty, erased, minimized, renamed. Not because it failed, but because it shattered a future narrative. The Kushite kings did something dangerous. They proved that Africa could rule without Europe, without Greece, without Rome. They built pyramids more than Egypt. They trained professional armies. They unified religion and state. And they did it without slavery as an economic engine. That alone made them a threat, not just to enemies, but to future storytellers. Because if people remembered Kush, they would ask uncomfortable questions. So later historians shrank them, called them secondary, labeled them influenced. History did not forget them by accident. They were removed. When Assyria invaded, Kush retreated, not destroyed, just displaced. But the real destruction came later. Greek writers minimized Africa. Roman chroniclers reframed it. Colonial historians erased it. Maps were redrawn. Timelines were shifted. Credit was reassigned. And the world you were taught was born. A world where Africa was always behind. Always catching up. Always receiving. But history doesn't disappear. It waits. And in part 2, you will see how African power didn't just survive. It reshaped the world from the shadows.
While Europe slept in tribal forests, Africa was already feeding the global economy. Gold from West Africa lit the markets of Rome. Salt from the Sahara preserved empires. Ivory, iron, cattle, manuscripts, and knowledge moved across Africa like blood through veins. This was not random trade. It was controlled trade. empires rose not where goods existed, but where roots were mastered. And Africa mastered them all. In West Africa rose empires so wealthy that historians panicked. The Ghana Empire controlled gold so tightly that raw gold nuggets were owned only by the king. Then came Mali. And then came Mansa Musa, the richest human being to ever live. When Musa traveled to Mecca, gold flooded Cairo so heavily that inflation lasted over a decade. Europe took notes. Arab scholars recorded details. And later historians tried to pretend it was a myth. But Timbuktu was real. Universities were real. Libraries holding hundreds of thousands of books were real. Africa was not illiterate. It was edited out. Mathematics, astronomy, law, medicine. African scholars taught Islamic Europe. African trade funded medieval economies. African navigators mapped stars long before compasses. And that terrified future powers. Because if Africa was recognized as a source, then Europe could not pretend to be the center. So the story changed. When trade could no longer be controlled peacefully, force replaced commerce. Slavery was not an accident. It was a systematic power grab. The goal was not just labor. It was memory destruction. Break the people. Erase the story. Rewrite the world. But something survived.
The transatlantic slave trade was not only physical violence. It was historical genocide. Names erased. Languages broken. Lineages cut. And yet, Africa did not disappear. It transformed. African knowledge crossed oceans. Farming techniques shaped the Americas. Music became resistance. Spiritual systems adapted, not died. Haitian revolutionaries defeated empires. African descendants forced the world to confront its lie. History fought back. Colonialism told Africa it had no past. Education systems repeated it. Media reinforced it. But archaeology disagrees. DNA disagrees. Ancient records disagree. Comma. And now, the internet disagrees. History does not belong to the powerful. It belongs to the truth. And when buried truth rises, power shifts. This is not the end. This is the return